Perfection was not a goal. It was the minimum acceptable standard. For the unseen hand, a reputation was built not on the targets removed, but on the flawless, untraceable elegance of the removal. To be the best was to be a ghost, a whisper, a sudden and inexplicable biological event. Yaqual, the exacting lead operative of Null Vector Epsilon, embodied this principle. His body was a collection of chitinous plates meeting at severe acute junctions, and his world was one of clear calculations and predictable outcomes. Tonight, the outcome was assured. The target was a human, a nascent species, and the contract promised to be blessedly simple. "Status vet." Yaqual's voice was a low thrum in the cool, silent dark of the observation post. The only light came from the soft glow of holographic displays casting shifting blue and green light on their faces. Vet, the team's tech specialist, didn't look up from his console. His many-jointed fingers moved across the interface, each movement economical and swift. "Phased extraction beam is locked, calibrated, and holding steady. Target's primary lymphatic filtration organ is isolated. Minimal EM signature. No collateral tissue disruption." A flat, dry tone, like a desert wind, carried his words. "We are green for extraction." From the corner, hunched over a biomonitor that displayed a cascade of data, Dr. Plox gave a theatrical sniff. He was a being of gelatinous sacs held together by little more than a thin, translucent membrane and an overwhelming intellectual arrogance. "The spleen," he corrected. "We are removing the spleen, a foundational but critical component of the soul-born immune system. Use the proper terminology, Vet. Exactness in language precedes exactness in action." "My apologies, Doctor," Vet said, the inflection flat. "Green for spleen yeeting." Plox's primary vocal sac bristled. "Insolent technician. Your job is to press the buttons I tell you to press." "And my button pressing has a perfect success rate," Vet countered without missing a beat. "Just like your biological predictions. So far." "Enough!" Yaqual commanded, his voice cutting through the low-level bickering like a sharpened claw. He was watching the main screen, a high-fidelity thermal image of the target's hotel suite, 200 meters away. The heat signature of Ambassador Rowan Finch was a warm, quiescent blob on a high-end mattress. "Doctor, you are certain of the dossier?" Plox puffed himself up, his gelatinous form quivering with indignation. "The client's intelligence package is adequate. It confirms our findings, which are, of course, impeccable. They are based on the HD 38529C specimen." Yaqual's chelicerae clicked softly, a quiet expression of unease. "The only specimen. A single cadaver from a mining disaster centuries ago. I don't like relying on antique data, especially when it's provided by a client with a vested interest in a swift result." "It is the only pristine, non-disintegrated human sample in the entire Unseen Hand archive," Plox retorted aghast. "It is priceless. Its biology is straightforward, pathetically so. The spleen is the linchpin of the lymphatic network. Remove it, and the system fails. It is simple, elegant, and undeniable." Yaqual stared at the sleeping human on the screen. His instincts, the ones that had kept him at the top of his profession for decades, were whispering that something was off. But the logic, Plox's arrogant, unassailable logic, was clear. "Proceed, Vet." "Proceeding. A thin, almost invisible line of light, no brighter than a stray moonbeam, lanced from their concealed emitter and passed harmlessly through the ferrocrete and plasteel of the opulent diplomatic hotel. On Vet's console, a three-dimensional anatomical model of the human showed the beam enveloping a small purple-red organ. Extraction in 3, 2, 1. There was no sound, no flash. On the model, the organ simply vanished. Tiny bit of data scrolled up the screen. Mass extraction, 157.4 grams. Containment field stable. No bio-alarms triggered. The beam retracted. "Spleen extraction complete," Vet announced. "Target's vitals show a minor transient dip in blood pressure, now stabilizing. He's still asleep." Yukol turned his gaze to his biologist. "Doctor." Dr. Plox preened. "A textbook execution, Yukol. As I predicted. Without the primary organ of his lymphatic system, his body's ability to filter pathogens and manage red blood cells is critically compromised. He'll experience a cascading immune failure. Systemic collapse is inevitable within the hour, perhaps 2. He'll simply stop functioning. A quiet, tragic, and entirely natural-seeming passing. No mess, no fuss, and perfectly aligned with the data from the HD 38529C specimen." Yukol gave a single sharp nod of satisfaction, pushing his earlier doubts aside. The data held. The mission was a success. "Log it. Another textbook operation. Pack it up. We'll be off-world before the room service droid makes its morning rounds." As Vet and Plox began to dismantle their equipment, each component stowed away with no wasted motion. Yukol allowed himself a moment of professional pride. This was why the unseen hand was the best. Clean, clinical, infallible. The human, this foundational creature standing in the way of perfectly profitable galactical war, was already dead. He just hadn't had the courtesy to notice yet. The next morning, Yukol was sipping a bulb of chilled nutrient broth in their well-appointed orbital base, a sterile chrome and glass affair that served as their temporary home. He was reviewing the morning's news feeds, a ritual that confirmed the success of their work. He expected a somber announcement, a report of a diplomat's sudden, tragic illness. He did not expect to see Ambassador Rowan Finch live and in high definition standing at a press podium. Yukol froze, the nutrient bulb held halfway to his primary mouth. On the screen, Rowan Finch looked fine. Better than fine. He looked positively chipper. His face, which had seemed a bit pale on their biomonitors, was flushed with vigor. He was flanked by the towering form of a Thrawn delegate and the geodic bulk of a Petrovian representative. And while the preliminary talks had been challenging, Rowan was saying with an affable smile, "I believe we're making real progress." He paused and gave a small, self-deprecating chuckle. "I must say I woke up feeling so much lighter this morning, positively buoyant, ready to tackle these negotiations with renewed vigor." The Thrawn delegate tilted its head, its tessellated eyes catching the light. It emitted a series of confused but vaguely pleased clicks. The Petrovian representative's internal glow pulsed softly in agreement. Yukol's grip tightened. The nutrient bulb, not designed for such pressure, ruptured. A thick beige paste spurted across the gleaming console. For a long, silent moment, Yukol stared at the mess, then back at the screen where the very much alive human was now telling a charming anecdote about a malfunctioning food replicator. His calm chimed. It was Vet. "Sir," Vet's voice said, flat as ever. "I assume you are reviewing the morning's news." "I am," Yukol managed, his own voice dangerously quiet. "There appears to be a minor discrepancy." between the expected outcome and the current reality. Minor, Yukal repeated, the word tasting like ass. He wiped the nutrient paste from the console with a trembling appendage. Get Plox. Debriefing room, now. The debriefing room was frantic. Dr. Plox paced furiously, his gelatinous form jiggling with agitation, while Vet remained calm at his console. Plox gestured wildly at a large screen displaying the anatomical data from the HD 38529C specimen.
It's biologically nonsensical!
Plox shrieked, his professional composure shredded.
The spleen is the linchpin! The data was unequivocal! Its removal should precipitate catastrophic septicemia! He should be dying of a dozen opportunistic infections! He should be soup!
Vet, seated at the console, calmly sipped from his own nutrient bulb. He brought up a secondary image on the screen beside the official schematic. It was a crude, almost cartoonish drawing of a human torso. According to their own ancient archives, specifically a pre-digital educational document called a coloring book, Vet said with his trademark dry wit, this organ is labeled tummy. It may be more accurate than our official data.
The HD 38529C specimen was a perfect sample!
Plock shot back.
Peer-reviewed, verified!
The result is failure. Yukal cut in, his voice a low growl. The cloying scent of nutrient paste seemed to cling to him, a reminder of his morning shock. The contract is still active. The target still lives. The client is not paying us for flukes or historical debates. He turned to Vet. Scan all public access databanks. News archives, civil registries, medical alerts, cross-reference Ambassador Rowan Finch with any documented biological anomalies. On it, sir. Vet said, his fingers keen in search parameters. Screens of text scrolled by. Searching. There are thousands of commendations, diplomatic achievements, a few traffic violations. Here's something. A news archive from the human colony Enceladus 8 years ago. Mine collapse traps dozens. Heroic negotiator first unseen. A grainy image appeared on screen, showing a soot-covered Rowan Finch being led from a collapsed mine entrance by emergency crews. The article mentions he suffered severe thoracic trauma during the rescue. Vet read. He was hospitalized for 3 weeks. Plock scoffed. Tabloid sensationalism. Irrelevant. But Yuqual was staring at the image. Vet, run a passive high-resolution scan of the target's thoracic cavity. Compare it to the HD 38529C baseline. Scanning. Vet said. A moment later, a detailed medical image appeared. Well, that's interesting. The left lung shows significant scar tissue, old damage, very old. It's functioning approximately 60% of baseline. Plox leaned in, his eyes gleaming with a new, desperate theory. A pre-existing condition, a structural weakness. Of course! His lymphatic system must have developed grotesque redundancies to compensate for his compromised respiratory system over the years. That's why the spleen has no effect. He's a biological deviant. He sounded triumphant as he had discovered this, rather than being proven catastrophically wrong by it. The weakness isn't his immune system, Plox declared, pointing a quivering appendage at the screen. It's his breathing. The scarring represents a point of failure. A targeted attack would cause a complete pulmonary collapse. No organism can survive on one damaged lung. You said no organism could survive without a spleen. Vet noted dryly. This is different, Plox insisted. Respiration is fundamental. The exchange of gases is the engine of all aerobic metabolism. This is not a theory. This is physics. Yukal looked from Plox's manic certainty to the scarred lung on the screen. It was a flawed deduction born of desperation, but it was the only lead they had. Target the healthy lung. The resulting hypoxia will lead to cascading organ failure. He paused, his gaze hardening. And this time, we will watch until it's finished. The observation post was quiet, but it was a strained, waiting quiet. The only sounds were the low hum of the beam emitter and the frantic thumping of Dr. Plux's primary circulatory sac. But his gaze kept flicking to the target's vital signs, as if expecting them to defy physics again. "Target asleep," he reported, his voice a low monotone. "Locking on left pulmonary organ. The one with the pre-existing scar tissue." "A compromised system is an unstable system," Plux muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "A gentle push is all it needs." "Beam engaged," Vet said, phasing through structural impediments. Yakov watched, his entire body rigid. He leaned forward, tracking the almost invisible line of energy as it once again breached the hotel walls. He watched the biomonitor as the beam enveloped the targeted lung. "Extraction commencing." On the screen, the left lung flickered, then vanished from the model. Mass extraction, 588.2 grams. Containment field, stable. The instant the organ was gone, the target's vitals plunged. Oxygen saturation dropped precipitously. Heart rate spiked, then grew erratic. On the bed, in the thermal view, the quiescent blob of Ambassador Finch suddenly spasmed. He sat, bolt upright, a choked, gargling sound echoing from the audio sensors. He clutched at his chest, his heat signature flaring with panic. "That's it," Plux whispered, his voice a high, reedy thing. He was clutching a data slate so tightly his gelatinous knuckles were white. "Respiratory failure is imminent. He's going into cardiac arrest. He has to." They watched, transfixed, as Rowan Finch gasped and wheezed. He let out a deep, rattling cough that seemed to shake his entire frame, a wet, ragged sound of a system in catastrophic distress. Then, slowly, his breathing began to even out. It was shallow, labored, a desperate, rasping affair, but it was rhythmic. His heart rate, while still elevated, settled into a frantic but steady beat. After a long minute, he flopped back down onto the pillow, his body still heaving, and fell back into a troubled sleep. The three assassins stared at the monitors. The human was still breathing. The human was still alive. Vet was the first to speak, his voice betraying a hint of something Yakov had never heard from him before. Bewilderment. "Sir?" he said, staring at the oxygen saturation levels, which had stabilized at a shockingly low but non-fatal number. "Target status is suboptimal, but operational." He looked away from his screen at Yakov. "Perhaps he was already dead. It would explain much." Dr. Plux made a small, strangled sound, like a balloon animal being slowly twisted to its breaking point. The main negotiation hall was a grand amphitheater of polished stone and shimmering energy fields designed to inspire awe and civility. Today, it was a pressure cooker. The Thrawn ambassador was emitting a series of sharp, aggressive clicks, its bladed forelimbs twitching, while the Petrovian's delicate, geotic form was glowing a dangerous, angry red. Into this standoff stepped Ambassador Rowan Finch. He looked tired. There was a slight gray pallor to his skin and a noticeable wheezing quality to his breathing. He walked to the central podium with a slow, deliberate pace. "Gentlemen, please," he began, his voice raspy. He was interrupted by a sudden, hacking coughing fit that bent him double. For a moment, it looked like he might collapse. The other delegates stared, a mixture of alarm and concern on their alien faces. In the observation post, Yakov's chelicerae were grinding with enough force to powder diamonds. "He's dying," Plux hissed, watching the feed. "He has to be. He's just being stubborn about it." Rowan finally caught his breath, straightening up with a weak, sheepish smile. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. "My apologies, everyone," he wheezed, patting his chest. "A bit short on breath today. You know, it feels like I'm running on half capacity." He looked from the glowering Petrovian to the agitated Thrawn, and a mischievous glint appeared in his eye. "But I imagine that's still faster than your fleet production schedule, huh?" He gave a small conspiratorial wink. A stunned silence fell over the hall. Then the Petrovian's red glow softened to a warm pink, and it emitted a low, resonant chime that sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. The Thrawn ambassador stilled its limbs and let out a series of soft, rattling clicks, the equivalent of a hearty laugh. The charged atmosphere in the room shattered, replaced by a ripple of amused murmurs. In the observation post, Plock sputtered. He weaponized hypoxia. He used his own asphyxiation as a joke." Vet cleared his throat. "Sir, the target appears to be leveraging his near-death experience as an icebreaker. His diplomatic influence is arguably increasing with each failed attempt on his life." Yaqual didn't respond. He just watched the human, this infuriatingly resilient creature, charm a room full of warriors with a joke about his own suffocation. The headache that had begun that morning was now a permanent, throbbing fixture behind his optical sensors. Their sanctuary had decayed. The observation post had become a stale, miserable cave. Empty nutrient bulbs littered the floor around Plox's station. The air was thick with the scent of superheated ceramic and despair.
"His entire respiratory system is an anomaly,"
Plox raged, frantically scrubbing through medical databases.
"His remaining lung must be grotesquely overdeveloped. It's not logical."
"Logic has left the building, Doctor," Vet said, his tone funeral. "It was last seen fleeing in the direction of a more predictable galaxy." Yaqual ignored them both. The failure was a fire in his gut. They were null vector epsilon. They did not fail. "We are missing something, a deeper vulnerability. Vet, run a full-spectrum, deep-tissue diagnostic. Every system, every organ, cross-reference metabolic functions, toxin levels, cellular decay rates. I want a complete picture. Find another weakness." "Running it now, sir," Vet said. "This may take a moment. It's a lot of data for one organism to have." They watched in silence as complex biological schematics filled the screen. Data streams scrolled past, a river of information. "Anomalies detected," Vet said after a long minute. "Significant metabolic fluctuations in the renal system. Toxin filtration rates are inconsistent. One side is operating at peak function, the other is not there." He zoomed in on a schematic of the ambassador's lower torso. The right kidney glowed a healthy green. The space the left one should be was an empty black void. "He's missing a kidney," Vet stated, as if announcing the weather. Plox surged forward, his despair momentarily replaced by rabid excitement.
"Of course, the shuttle accident. Vet, search for Rowan Finch in V404 Sagittari."
Vet's fingers typed, "Accessing. It's a sealed military incident report, but the public commendation mentions severe abdominal injuries sustained during atmospheric re-entry failure. That's it. He's been operating on a single kidney for years. His entire excretory system is a house of cards on a single overworked pillar."
"This is it,"
Plox whispered, his voice trembling with renewed purpose.
"This is the true weak point. Not the lungs, not the spleen. The waste disposal system. Bilateral renal failure. Nothing survives uremic poisoning. The buildup of toxins is absolute. We remove the remaining kidney, and he is finished. There are no tertiary kidneys."
"Are you sure, Doctor?" Vet asked. "At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he had one in his leg." "Do it," Yukol ordered, his voice flat. The elegance was gone. The artistry was gone. All that remained was a grim, grinding necessity. "Take the last one." That night, they extracted Rowan Finch's remaining kidney. He groaned in his sleep, his thermal signature fluctuating wildly. But he did not die. The next morning, as they were waiting for the inevitable news of his demise, a small, unmarked medical supply shuttle made a quiet delivery to the human embassy's landing pad. Vet intercepted the manifest. "Analysis indicates the equipment wasn't delivered from off-world," he reported, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "It came from the human embassy's own mobile support unit. Standard issue for the diplomatic corps, apparently." "What equipment?" Yukol demanded. Vet zoomed the external camera in on a crate being unloaded. The stenciling on the side was clear. "Humor purification unit. Portable. Mark IV." Before anyone could process this, a red light began to flash on Yukol's personal console. It was a Priority 1 message routed directly from the Hands leadership, forwarding a communication from their client. The text was stark, brutal, and displayed in angry capital letters. "The obstacle remains. His condition appears to have worsened, but his effectiveness has increased. The Petrovians are now deeply concerned for his well-being. Explain. Resolve." The unspoken threat of failure and its consequences filled the small room. Later that day, their long-range visual feed showed the peace talks move to a diplomatic garden party, and there, in the center of it all, was Ambassador Rowan Finch. He was wearing a finely tailored Vespin silk suit that cleverly concealed a thin, clear tube running from under his sleeve to a small, humming machine hidden beneath a table laden with canapes. The machine itself was inexplicably covered with a brightly colored, hand-knitted cozy, patterned with what looked like small, smiling suns. Dr. Plox stared, his sacks drooping. "External purifiers exist, of course," he stammered. "For catastrophic toxic exposure, for battlefield conditions, but to issue them as standard equipment? To treat total organ failure as an expected travel expense? The wastefulness, the sheer biological pessimism. What kind of species anticipates that its diplomats will simply run out of parts?" "The kind that wins negotiations, apparently," Vet said, his gaze fixed on the tea cozy. "Sir, I believe that is a soul cage. The garish knitting is a runic baffle, designed to confuse mystical senses. We are not dealing with a man. We are dealing with a heavily fortified necromancer." Yukol closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his snout, right below his throbbing optical sensor. The headache was now a palpable entity, a malevolent passenger in his skull. "We cannot kill him," he said, his voice a low rasp. "The client is furious. We will pivot. Non-lethal incapacitation. If he cannot see the treaty, he cannot sign the treaty. Vet, target the optic nerve." The attack was carried out while Rowan was reading a brief. A high-frequency sonic burst, precise and silent, flash cauterized his right optic nerve. He yelped, dropped his datapad, and clapped a hand on his eye. The next day, he appeared at the negotiations wearing a stylish black silk eye patch. He greeted the assembled delegates with a broad, disarming grin. "Ahoy, mateys," he declared. He proceeded to pepper his remarks with a series of excruciating bad pirate puns vowing to keep an eye out for a good deal, and to plunder the depths of our disagreements to find the buried treasure of compromise. His popularity soared. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was a charming, resilient rogue who looked dashingly piratical. The pressure from high command, the absurdity of the situation, and the sheer infuriating persistence of the target had pushed Yukol to the edge. He made a call he had made only twice before in his long, distinguished career. He contacted the Synthesis, the Hand's legendary master poisoner. The solution was Cytoplasmic Dissolution Agent 9. It was delivered by a cloaked dust drone into the ambassador's chilled gazpacho. The assassins watched grim-faced. They watched him eat the soup. They watched him frown. They watched him excuse himself to the restroom. They watched him return 10 minutes later, pale but structurally sound. All better, he announced cheerfully. Now, where were we? Vet sighed. Poisons don't work on the undead, sir. This is basic law. That night, in the privacy of his suite, the cheerful mask fell away. Rowan Finch moved with the slow, weary motions of a man running on fumes. He unhooked himself from the humming dialysis machine. He caught his reflection in a mirror. A tired, middle-aged man with a wheeze, a gray pallor, and a new black eye patch. He looked exhausted, broken, a collection of damaged parts. He sighed a deep, shuddering breath. Then he straightened up. He adjusted his tie. Right, he muttered to his reflection. One more day. He patted the purring machine. You and me, buddy. Let's get this done.
Your delivery drone must have missed the target.
Pluck shrieked, pointing a trembling, gelatinous finger at Vet. The observation post was a wreck. My drone's telemetry was perfect, Vet retorted, his voice dangerously flat. The dose was delivered to the geometric center of the soup's surface area. I have the logs. Perhaps your synthesis masterpiece slushy mix was defective.
The Synthesis has a 608-year record of flawless compositions.
There's a first time for everything. Or perhaps you cannot poison that which has no life.
Enough!
Yukal's voice cracked like a whip. Dr. Plox, in a final, desperate paroxysm of scientific inquiry, had commandeered a large, white data board. He sketched a crude outline of a human, then savagely jabbed red X's over the spleen, a lung, both kidneys, and an eye. He titled it, A Study in Spiteful Biology.
It makes no sense,
he ranted, pacing in front of his chart of despair.
It's like the universe's cruelest joke, a walking, talking collection of optional extras and spare parts.
Vet, watching the meltdown, stared at the chaotic chart. He's an undead lich, he said, his voice completely deadpan. It is the only logical explanation. The removal of the spleen, a blood filter, a classical defense against vampires. The destruction of a lung to prevent him from being tracked by breath. The kidneys to stop alchemical potions from working. The eye to blind him to divine light. And now the poison fails. We need to find his phylactery. He looked pointedly at the live feed of the tea cozy. Just then, Dr. Plox stopped his ranting. He went utterly still, a look of pure, unadulterated horror dawning on his face. He was staring at the metabolic data from the soup incident. Oh no, he whispered. Oh, by the swirling nebulae. No. What is it, Doctor? Yoqual demanded. Plox looked up, his primary eyes wide with a terrible new understanding. His liver. When we removed his kidneys, his metabolism rerouted. His liver has been hyper-processing everything to compensate. It's working at 400% of its baseline function. He took a shaky step towards Aqual. Cytoplasmic dissolution agent 9 is a complex protein chain. His overclocked liver didn't recognize it as a structural command. He recognized it as a large foreign molecule. He paused, letting the full weight of his discovery settle. Sir, it treated our liquefaction agent like a bad curry. It metabolized it. It burned it out. We didn't just fail to kill him with our ultimate poison. We made him immune to it by trying to kill him in other ways first. Desperate, they violated a dozen of the Hand's directives and planted a high-fidelity audio bug on the ambassador's aide. They listened as the aide helped the ambassador prepare for the final, critical session. The aide's voice was young and filled with genuine worry. "Ambassador, are you sure you're all right, sir? I mean, first the wheezing, now the nasty turn you had after lunch. The meta team is concerned." They heard the sound of a jacket being draped over a chair, followed by Rowan's voice. It was tired but warm. "Oh, I'm fine, son. Just a bit of indigestion, and the lung is an old story. Souvenir from that mine rescue in Enceladus. The roof came down. I was lucky to get out with just the one." The aide's voice was now barely a whisper. "Sir, forgive me for being blunt, but how do you keep going?" There was a long pause. The assassins leaned closer. They heard the clink of a glass, then Rowan Finch laughed. It wasn't his public laugh. It was a quieter, raspy, wheezing sound filled with an undeniable warmth. "You want to know the secret, son? The real secret to my ridiculous survival rate?" "Yes, sir. Very much." "Paperwork," Rowan said simply. "After the first couple of major incidents, the medical forms, the insurance claims, the disability waivers, they pile up. You get a file so thick it needs its own transport container. After a while, you start to feel a certain personal obligation to outlive the bureaucracy. You put in all that effort to document your various calamities. Dying would feel like giving up on a long-term project right before the finish line." He paused, and they could almost hear the wry smile in his voice. "People think it's about being strong or brave or an undead lich for that matter. Son, I'm just a middle-aged man who's had a spectacular run of bad luck. But I'll be damned if I let a few missing pieces or a bit of faulty wiring stop me from finishing my work. I'm just too stubborn for that." The three assassins listened in a profound, stunned silence. The truth was so much more mundane, and so much more terrifying than any theory they could have concocted. It wasn't biology, it wasn't technology, it wasn't necromancy. It was grit. Pure, simple, mulish, administrative grit. Aqual reached out and deactivated the audio feed, plunging the room back into silence. He looked at his broken team. Plox was slumped in his chair, his life's work rendered moot by the concept of stubbornness. Vet was staring at the dented console, his expression unreadable. Before Aqual could speak, Vet broke the silence. His voice was flat, clear, and utterly serious. "Sir, our operational model is based on predictable systems failures. The target is not a predictable system. The target is a cascade failure that remains operational by choice. We cannot model this. We cannot win." Aqual nodded slowly. Vet was right. He opened a secure, encrypted channel to the Hand's High Council. A moment later, the stern holographic face of the first Hand wavered into existence. The being was ancient, its features carved from what looked like petrified anger. "Aqual." The first Hand's voice boomed, a sound like grinding consonants. "Report. Has the obstacle been resolved?" Aqual took a deep, steadying breath. Contracts 9 Delta 5, he said, his voice firm. Aborting. The first hand's hologram seemed to swell. Explain that word. I do not know it. I am aborting the contract, first hand. On what grounds? The voice thundered. The unseen hand does not abort. The unseen hand does not fail. You, of all my operatives, know this. The unseen hand also does not engage in protracted, costly, and unwinnable wars against a single entity, Aqual countered, his voice rising to meet the challenge. On the grounds that the target is unlikable by our standards, not biologically but philosophically. Philosophy does not stop a phased plasma bolt, the first hand sneered. No, but it creates unacceptable collateral damage to our reputation. Yaqual shot back, his composure finally breaking. To continue this is no longer an assassination. It is a siege. It is a war of attrition against a single, unbelievably stubborn man. It risks making the hand appear not elegant, but brutish. Not formidable, but futile. It would damage our reputation far more than an aborted contract. He took a heaving breath, then played his final card. The bureaucratic one. Furthermore, all operating costs, including hazard consultations, premium ordnance expenditure, and the fee for the synthesis, have now exceeded the client's payment by 280%. To continue is economically, strategically, and I argue, existentially unviable. We cannot defeat this man with our methods. To try would be to admit our methods are flawed. The first hand was silent for a long, heavy moment, his holographic eyes boring into a qual, searching for weakness or for an excuse. He saw none. He saw only the haggard, broken shell of his finest operative, defeated by something he could not comprehend. You are suggesting we create a new failure classification, the first hand said slowly. I am suggesting we create a new threat classification, Aqual corrected. One that a lesser team would have died discovering. I propose we designate this species existential hazard. Acknowledge that they do not operate on principles we can exploit. It is not a failure, first hand. It is vital, hard-won intelligence. The first hand considered this. The logic was sound. Framing it as a discovery rather than a failure was a path to preserving the hand's myth of infallibility. Log it, the first hand commanded, his voice returning to its cold, hard bass line. Contract 9 Delta 5 aborted due to unforeseen existential complications. A full refund will be issued to the client, minus expenses. Issue a hand-wide Level 1 advisory. Effective immediately. Human targets are to be reclassified. Designation: high risk, low reward, existential hazard. Avoid at all cost. The hologram flickered. One more thing, Qual. First hand, your report is accepted, but your team's performance was suboptimal. Null Vector Epsilon is on probation. Your next contract will be pro bono to recoup the hand's losses. Do not fail again. The hologram vanished, leaving Aqual standing in the ruins of his perfect record with a new, terrifying respect for the power of paperwork. In the Grand Hall of Concord, cameras flashed and the assembled dignitaries from 100 worlds applauded. On the central dais, Ambassador Rowan Finch, looking a little worn, a little pale, but beaming, stood proudly between the Thrawn and the Petravian ambassadors as they each pressed an appendage to the data slate. Formally signing the historic peace treaty, he leaned just slightly on his trusty tea-cozy-covered dialysis machine, which hummed away faithfully. The newsfeed crawler at the bottom of the holoscreen displayed the immediate aftermath. And in a related development, shares in the top 3 galactic arms manufacturers have plummeted, following the unexpected cancellation of several major intersystem weapons contracts. Rowan smiled, shook hands, and accepted the accolades, completely and blissfully unaware of the silent, invisible war he had won. Weeks later, at a glittering gala celebrating the new era of peace, a nervous young delegate from a minor avian species approached the man of the hour.
"Ambassador Finch," the delegate chirped, "your resilience is legendary. Forgive my rudeness, but the stories are incredible. If I may be so bold, how many of your original organs do you even have left?"
Rowan Finch, who had just managed to save his drink from toppling over, took a thoughtful sip. He winked with his good eye and gave a small, charming shrug. "Enough to get by," he said with a smile. He then turned, promptly tripped over a passing service droid, and spilled his entire drink down the front of a stern-looking 4-star Ulvian general. He immediately began apologizing profusely, his face a mask of horrified embarrassment, once again turning a minor disaster into a disarmingly awkward and charming encounter that would be retold for years. Far away, on his sleek ship bound for a pro bono contract involving a silicon-based slug on a low-gravity moon, Aqua watched the gala broadcast. He saw the spill, the apology, the general's stony face slowly cracking into a smile. A strange, unfamiliar expression crossed Yaqual's own features. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was respect. He took a long drink of his nutrient broth. Then he turned to his console and, with a few deliberate keystrokes, opened the hand's primary xenobiological database. He navigated to the file labeled Human Anatomy, Soulborn Standard, based on HD 38529C specimen. He didn't delete it. Deleting it would be an act of passion, of denial. Aqua was a creature of exact records. Instead, he created a new top-level entry that superseded all other data. His fingers moved with grim purpose. Override directive engaged. New master entry. Target analysis directive 001. Field, physiology status, secondary. Data, see attached 78,000 failed analytical models. Field, psychology, status, primary. Data, see below. He paused, then typed a single, definitive word. Stubborn. He closed the file. Some things, he decided, did not need to be understood. They simply needed to be acknowledged and then avoided at all cost.